Exactly 30 days before Flight 80 vaporized over the Appalachian Mountains, an anonymous package arrived at the FBI containing the exact coordinate, time, and casualty list of the crash. When the plane went down precisely as described, killing all 92 people on board, agents stormed the sender's apartment only to find a warm cup of coffee and a message scrawled on the living room wall in wet paint: "I tried to stop it." What investigators uncovered inside that locked apartment would shatter their understanding of time itself, revealing a terrifying truth they tried to bury forever. The apartment belonged to Arthur Vance. He was a 45-year-old archivist with no criminal record, no pilot's license, and no apparent connection to the aviation industry. Yet, his apartment was a labyrinth of madness. Every square inch of the walls was covered in complex mathematical formulas, meteorological charts, and dates. Among the chaos, one date was circled in thick, red ink. It was the date of the crash. Lead investigator Donald Miller stood in the center of the quiet room. The smell of fresh paint and stale coffee hung heavy in the air. Arthur had fled only minutes before the tactical team breached the door. He had left behind his wallet, his keys, and his phone. He had vanished into thin air. But what they found next made no sense. Underneath the kitchen sink, hidden behind pipes, was a police scanner tuned to the local air traffic control frequency. Beside it lay a diary. The first entry was dated exactly 3 years prior. The FBI immediately formed their first, most logical theory: Arthur Vance was a terrorist. He hadn't predicted the crash. He had caused it. They believed he had hacked the plane's internal guidance systems or planted a highly sophisticated altitude-triggered explosive. It was the only explanation that kept the world making sense. Investigators combed through Arthur's digital footprint. They analyzed his bank accounts, his search history, and his garbage. But the evidence quickly began to crumble. Arthur Vance had zero background in computer science or explosives. He lived on a modest salary from the university archives. More importantly, airport security footage from the day of the flight showed the plane had been swept by explosive detection K-9 units just hours before takeoff. Then came the autopsy and black box reports. The plane had not exploded. It had been brought down by an incredibly rare meteorological phenomenon known as a localized microburst, a sudden, violent downdraft of wind that literally slammed the aircraft into the side of the mountain. No human technology could trigger a microburst. No hacker could control the weather. And that was when the real mystery began. If Arthur Vance didn't cause the crash, how did he know the exact wind speed, the exact altitude, and the exact second the plane would lose lift, 30 days before it even took off? But the strangest part was still to come. Desperate for answers, the FBI turned their attention to the letters. Arthur hadn't just sent a package to the FBI. He had sent identical letters to 3 major news outlets. Investigators hypothesized that this was an elaborate hoax. Perhaps the letters were mailed after the crash, and a corrupt postal worker had backdated the postmarks. It was a common trick used in insurance fraud. They seized the mailbags. They put the letters under high-powered forensic microscopes. They tested the ink, the paper, and the adhesive on the envelopes. The results were chilling. The postmark was genuine. It had been stamped in a small, blue mailbox in downtown Boston on September 14, exactly 1 month before the disaster. The ink was standard ballpoint, but the paper itself was highly unusual. It was a specific type of parchment that hadn't been manufactured since 1984. Why would a man predicting a modern disaster use 40-year-old paper? The investigators were hitting dead ends at every turn. They decided to dig deeper into Arthur's past at the university archive. They interviewed his co-workers. They described him as quiet, obsessive, and deeply troubled. One colleague recalled Arthur whispering a strange phrase weeks before his disappearance: "The hum is getting louder. It's resetting." The investigators searched the archive database for any files Arthur had accessed before he fled. They found he had spent months researching a highly classified military operation from 1983 called Project Zephyr. Project Zephyr was a short-lived atmospheric experiment conducted in the same mountains where Flight 804 crashed. The project was abruptly shut down after a military transport plane vanished in the area without a trace. The date of that military disappearance? October 14, 1983. Exactly 40 years to the day before Flight 804 went down. And what investigators discovered next would change everything. They tracked a credit card purchase Arthur had made under an alias just hours after he escaped his apartment. He had bought a one-way bus ticket to a remote town in the Maine wilderness, near an abandoned military outpost once used for Project Zephyr. A tactical team was dispatched to a cabin deep in the woods. When they arrived, the cabin was freezing. Ice coated the windows. In the center of the main room sat a heavy, vintage iron safe. The door of the safe was wide open. Inside lay a single, dusty VHS tape. Agent Miller took the tape back to the field office. He inserted it into a player. The screen flickered with heavy static, then resolved into an image. It was Arthur Vance. But he looked completely different. In his driver's license photo, he was a healthy, middle-aged man. On the tape, his hair was stark white, his face was gaunt, and his eyes were hollow with exhaustion. He spoke directly to the camera. His voice was a raspy whisper. "If you are watching this, it means I failed again. This is my 37th attempt to break the loop." Arthur explained that in 1983, as a young researcher for Project Zephyr, he had been at the ground station when the military plane vanished. The experimental electromagnetic pulse hadn't just destroyed the plane, it had fractured time in a 5-mile radius. Every 40 years, on October 14th, the fracture opens. The event repeats. He wasn't predicting the future. He was remembering the past. He was trapped in a temporal anomaly, forced to watch the same 92 people die over and over again. Every time the plane crashed, his consciousness was thrown back 30 days, into his younger self, with his memories intact. "I've tried everything," Arthur said on the tape, tears streaming down his face. "I warned the media. I warned the government. I tried to block the runway. But the universe always corrects itself. The plane always takes off. The storm always forms. And I am always left behind to start again." He held up a newspaper to the camera. The headline read, "Flight 804 crashes in mountains." But Agent Miller froze when he saw the date on the newspaper Arthur was holding. The date on the paper was October 15, 2063. The video ended with a blast of static. The room was silent. Agent Miller sat in the dark, the hum of the television screen vibrating in his ears. Was this the elaborate delusion of a madman? Or had they just witnessed a message from a man living in a reality we cannot comprehend? The FBI officially closed the case. They ruled the crash an act of God, and Arthur Vance was listed as a missing person, presumed dead. But Agent Miller could never let it go. He spent his remaining years in the agency quietly searching the archives. Decades later, as an old man, Miller decided to look up the passenger manifest of Flight 804 one last time. He scrolled down the list of the 92 victims who died on that fateful day. And there, at the very bottom of the page, was a name that had never been there before. Arthur Vance. Seat 12B. He hadn't run away. He had boarded the flight. If time is a circle, and the loop is destined to repeat, then somewhere out there, right now, is Arthur Vance writing another letter? If you received a warning about tomorrow, would you believe it? Subscribe to Nocturne Files for more unsolved mysteries of the dark.